Hi, it's Ileana. So today I am going to discuss the paper called Candidate Genes Related to Spiritual Mediumship, a Whole Exome Sequencing Analysis of Highly Gifted Mediums. So this preliminary paper was done by Brazilian scientists who got 100 and something mediums or psychics or psionics, whatever you want to call it, who practice psychic abilities, doing sessions, non for profit. They don't take any money, the psychics, for the session work. They just do stuff on a weekly basis. And their genes were tested to see if they had any unusual mutations, and if their non-psychic relatives didn't have these gene mutations. So the scientists did find about 33 gene mutations that the psychics had that their non-psychic relatives who don't do psychic readings or stuff like that, they didn't have those genes active. So the Notch4 gene had some mutations in it, and other gene splices had mutations. What they found, which correlates the most, is I'm just going to summarize from reading this whole article what the scientists found from a scientific perspective for testing mediums for psychic abilities. Certain genes have been found to have mutations in those that actively use their abilities. The more you use your psychic abilities for psychic readings, for doing remote viewing, for doing Akashic readings, stuff that has to do with activating your psi, using your consciousness to connect with something on a psychic ability, there's more genetic mutations in those individuals. So there are some genetic markers that are altered in psychics, and those markers are not present in non-psychics because they're actively using their psi abilities, and that perhaps changes their genetics. Or they're born with that predisposition, and the more they use their psychic abilities, the more mutations are prevalent in their genes. Because some genes can be changed through organic environmental factors, and some genes are just, when you're born with mutations. It could be an either or situation. The study paper also revealed that there is a stronger active immunological response and immune inflammatory response, as well as alterations in certain types of antigens that creates the gene modifications in psychics. So there's the immune system, and the immunological factor seems to be very strong, a stronger immunological and immune inflammatory response in the psychics mediums, in how those gene mutations express themselves. So sensitive immunological components that are heightened in the human body play a role in more active psychic abilities. That is what it seems like for what the research shows in these gene mutations. So there's some kind of an immunological response going on here. These are my own notes from what I read. And I went through this paper very carefully. I read it from top to bottom. It seems to have an interesting basis. And this is very scientific. It is not something that is just cooked up in some lab. This was an experiment. And they did questionnaires of the mediums, and they chose the highest mediums in the communities. So very interesting experiment. And here I highlighted some portions that I thought were interesting. The pathway with the most significant strength in gene expression is the translocation of ZAP70 to immunological synapse, SAA20 0.02430. This has to do with genes, different genes, like clusters of genes, leukocyte immunoglobulin receptor B1, LILRB1, leukocyte immunoglobulin receptor B3, LILRB3, human leukocyte antigen, class 2 DR beta 1, HLA TRB1, human leukocyte antigen, class 2 DR beta 5, HLDRB5. They found a lot of activity in those genes, human leukocyte antigen, class 2 DQ beta 1, HLA-DQB1. And these are gene expressions in the spot of the genes where this stuff is going on, mutations, missense mutations or larger mutations. There's also the Notch receptor 4 or Notch4 gene. Some other gene expressions were in the zinc finger protein, 717, ZNF717, lysine 4, MUCA, lysine 3A, MUC3A, and MUC19, MUC19 genes. So there's a very ontological gene ontology that's very interesting in how these 33 genes are expressed. There's more genes, but it is very, very interesting in that there's a lot of stuff going on that's connected to the MUC19 gene. MUC119 particularly stood out, being the most prevalent in both the medium samples, 87.04%, and the validation sample, 96.66. Furthermore, MUC19 was identified in both twins and ranks among the genes with higher expression in the pineal gland, which is intriguing considering the long-standing hypothesis that this gland serves as the epicenter for spiritual experiences and amplified ability, pineal gland. And they talk about the gene expression ZAP70 and how it highly connects to the immunological synapse exhibited. It exhibits the highest strength. So this gene expression stuff and mutations are highly connected to the immunological synapses and the immune cell activation, modulating inflammatory responses, and the immune responses and autoreactivity. There's all kinds of interesting things here at play. Connects immunological responses, immunology, immune system cell responses, antigens, cytokines, cells, all that stuff to this gene expression and these mutations in the immune cells and inflammatory responses, and heightened immunological senses of everything being sensed in the world around the mediums. They have higher senses, and that can be related to their immunology and immune system. Sensory perception. Everything is heightened. They have higher senses activated. So that's interesting, and it has to do with alterations in immune cells, which play a crucial role mediating information from external to internal environment. That heightened sense of interaction with the world. So that could be with immunological responses and immune cell responses and inflammatory responses and health, and how these genes are altered in physiological conditions and psychic. The more you're exposed to psychic phenomenon and you practice psychic ability, the higher chance that there's an expression of gene mutations, which is interesting. I found that interesting to me, what they were saying, that this is higher levels of self-transcendent spirituality, appear to be robust indicators of an individual's enhanced ability to regulate health holistically, facilitated by well-integrated brain connectivity and dynamic gene expression that adapts to changing conditions. Yeah, these psychics had very high brain connectivity and gene expression, in that their various mutations were in interesting gene expressions. Consequently, gifted mediums who exhibit better average health and unique genetic variants related to inflammation, immune response, and adaptation contrast with the pervasive markers of low self-awareness prevalent in poorly regulated populations under current global conditions. So the cleaner your environment is, the cleaner your genes are, the healthier you are. This all plays a part in psionic abilities and psychic abilities supposedly in these gene expressions. From what they found, I'm not sure, but it's interesting information, and I kind of like highlighted the portions of this article. But the most interesting thing to me is that they're actually doing tests to test psychics and mediums and psionics to see if there's something that makes them different, makes them tick differently, if there's something in them that makes them stand out, and their DNA makes them stand out, and that there's more genetic mutations in certain genes, whereas there's none of those mutations in non-psychic people, like family relatives that are not psychic and are not practicing psychic abilities on people, on other people, for readings and such psi abilities. So it's interesting that this was done, this study, and this paper is going to be officially published in a edited capacity, and it was accepted on 24th December 2024 for the edited publication, and submitted October 4th 2024 for the journal. This is Brazilian Psychiatric Association, a Brazilian Journal of Psychiatry. And they found this, that medium psychics and psionics, they're perceived as maybe having, like, if you go to a psychiatrist or something, like having mental problems, but they don't have mental problems. They have psychic abilities that they're working with. So it's not a mental issue, but psychiatrists could perceive it as a mental issue, like you're seeing the dead, or you could talk to dead people like this is like an issue, a mental health issue. No, it's not. It's a psychic ability. So it's not a mental health issue that can be fixed in grown-ups or kids. It's an ability, or the ability to connect consciously with non-human intelligences or crafts. That's an ability to summon crafts, what Jake Barber has popularized recently, with the recent disclosures, if any of that is truth, which I think there is truth to it, and in some degrees. It's psionics working in these government programs, military programs that are classified, or outside the government in, aerospace corporations, whatever it is, government-based funded or non-based funded. Some governments don't even know that these full programs are even going on, military-wise, or, whatever it is, whichever program, legacy program it's part of. Psionic, aerospace, Black Ops. Seems like psionic stuff is coming forward as part of disclosure. Well, okay, you want to test if there's psionics in the world? Have them do DNA testing, have them do brain scan testing. If they have psychic abilities, what makes them so special? What makes them stand out and apart? Like, is there something different about their genetics? Is there something different about their brains? If they have certain parts of the brain that's more activated when they're using their psychic abilities. these things can be tested through MRI scans and other scans. These things can be tested apparently through genetics. What makes you stand out as a psionic? If you're claiming you can summon crafts, if you're claiming you can talk to the dead or talk to other people psychically or extraterrestrials or summon UFOs, UAP, fine. Is there something different in your genetics and your brain scan? There usually is. Chemically wise, there is, and there's something that makes these people stand out. I believe it has to do with immunology and chemistry. Their chemistry and immunology and genetics will be different because they're tapping into different things in their own bodies and their chemistry. And they're energetically and organically changing their own bodies by working with these abilities and by working with other people using these abilities. It changes you on a profound level, both organically, consciously, mentally. The more you use your abilities, the more you activate things in your body and change things molecularly and on the immunological scale in your body, in your soul, because this is connected to energy and frequency. So this particular study was of interest to me because it changes you on a genetic level. You have a predisposition of having these genes maybe semi-active when you're born, and they even change over time because some genes can. They can change expression, and you might have not had that mutation there one moment, and now you do because you're practicing your abilities, psi abilities. So this is interesting to see that there's even a study that was done on this. If you are psychic and maybe something makes you different, that there's something that's testable to compare to genetically, to see what that is. If you have these abilities, you're making claims. Well, can this be tested from a scientific point of view? I want to see it tested, and apparently it can. So to me, this is why I'm going over this thing, because psionic disclosure is popping up left and right. That there's these psionics that can summon extraterrestrial non-human crafts, that they can consciously summon these crafts, bring them down, and they're being shot down, and that this is secret disclosure coming forward. If there's something to that, maybe all these people should go through these genetic tests, the psionics, and brainwave scans, tested scientifically, not just a theoretical hypothesis or talking testimony disclosure. Sure, they might be able to provide videos of summoning craft and bringing down a craft, having a craft come in, not shooting it down, inviting it in to come in peacefully and land, shooting a video of it. Or great, okay, that's a form of disclosure. They can have images of orbs being summoned, one form of disclosure. But what about scientific evidence? DNA samples, brain scan samples. What makes these psionics so unique and different? That they have these abilities that can summon something to come in, or consciously communicating with non-human intelligences. What makes them special? What makes them different biologically? Have that information, do the scientific tests. And I think this is a great model of what these guys did in Brazil. Yes, Brazilian Journal of Psychiatry, but you have to start somewhere. And, it's pre-publication, pre-proof. This particular study is going to be officially peer-reviewed and published. But I'm pretty interested in this kind of stuff from a scientific, logical point of view. This kind of stuff could be evidence of these psionics existing. If they come forward, they're claiming to be psionic, all right, have them do the DNA scans, the brain scans, open access names, who these psionics are, what scientific tests were done. Gary Nolan, step up, start doing this stuff, because the technology is out there to do it. There's scientific ways of proving something, of taking samples from different variants of the populace, psionics versus non-psionics, and how people are different or similar. There's ways of testing this. This is a start. I think this is an interesting model, which in the future has a viability to test for this stuff. I know people want proof. Well, if you're psionic and you're making these claims, where's the proof? Scientifically, it's not just, I can summon these things and here's the video of it. Okay, you're psionic. There might be something that genetically makes you different. There's something in your brain, the way your brain functions, physicality of your brain, your amygdala, your pituitary, your hypothalamus might be different. Something might be different about you that makes these brain scans stand out. There could be variants in your brain, different brain waves, different things in your brain that stand out the more you use your ability, because there is. And genetically, in the gene mutations and gene variants also makes you a little bit more special, stand out, than somebody who's non-practicing psychic, whatever that is. And I'm not trying to be exclusionary of anybody. Anybody can learn psychic ability and try to practice it to whatever the degree they want. You can learn that stuff, and you can be psychic to whatever degree you're predisposed or want to be. But there are people who are born psychic, natural ability that they can amplify by expanding it, learn to be a shaman, learn to be a psychic, learn to be an Akashic Records reader, hypnosis, remote viewing, galactic soul readings, psychic readings, tarot readings, that all amplify your psychic abilities. Or just trying to do psychic communication with animals and children and other human beings, because we're all psychic to a certain level and we can communicate telepathically with each other. The more you practice all that stuff, the more your ability is activated, whether naturally or just through practice. Because we can all activate certain amounts of psionic ability within ourselves to different levels and degrees of variance. So to those psionics that are super psionic and doing all this work, like Jake Barber claims, well, there's ways of medically proving these aspects. And I think that should be more integrated scientifically. That's just my opinion as a person who likes science and logic. I think this is interesting, and I think more should be done in this area of exploring psi abilities, psionics, and how it connects to consciousness. Thank you so much.